do the people that are doing the training, the aliens that are doing the training, do they ever use violence if they're not getting their way?
Yes. Now, violence to them is not violence for us, which is shooting somebody, hurting somebody with a hammer. That they don't do. But there is a certain pathway to actually doing a form of violence. The pathway, there's only one thing that they're concerned with. That, in other words, when an abductee is helping a hybrid, it's not just that the hybrid is alone. There's usually a security hybrid who's overlooking sometimes the learning situations, not always, but there's a security hybrid who's attached to this particular hybrid's case. And there's also what I call a personal project hybrid who has been attached to the female or to a male, but I've only seen it with females, for many years, oftentimes since they were children. And they are, the two of them, the security hybrid and the personal project hybrid, are the protector of the hybrid who is, of the hubrid, let's put it that way, who's in the process of actually moving in. The only way that a person who's under control can violate something, the only way that they can do something that is against the rules, is to remember it and talk about it. That is the only thing that they're concerned about. That blows their cover. That means that bad things can happen. Maybe I can show up at her home with a shotgun one day, although it wouldn't help because I wouldn't be able to do anything since they would control me immediately. But they do not want it. This is a clandestine operation. This is not something, it's all done in secret. It's not something that they want anybody to know about ever. So, what we see here is people who simply keep talking to me, and they tell them not to do it. They threaten them. They threaten me. Sometimes those threats are fairly serious and got me in all sorts of trouble once. But have
you ever been personally threatened, and do you fear for your family?
Yes, but only through abductees' testimony, not somebody coming up to me getting the impression that I better stop or anything like that. Nothing like that. So eventually what happens is they can't get the person to stop. They can't do it. And I just keep doing sessions with them and and they can't get them to stop. And they threaten everything. They scare the living hell out of them and all that. Then they resort ultimately to violence. It starts out with sexual violence, but they've had sexual stuff all for years and years. But it even can go to a certain amount of cutting, just to teach the person a lesson that heals up very quickly. But there's a cut and there's blood there originally. Then to things as off the wall as sticking one's thumb into the bottom of a cheekbone and pressing real hard, and there's something going on there. Apparently it hurts, however they do it, but there's no mark. Who would ever think of that, of all things? I've had a whole bunch of people describe that. What the heck? Of all things to think of, that would not be the first thing that comes to my mind when you're thinking of violence.
That sounds like torture.
Well, it's just they're inflicting pain, but there's no bruise. That's the whole point of it. Then there's pushing a woman down backwards and then pulling them up by their hair. That I've seen a bunch of times. One woman who was a little overweight actually broke her wrist when she fell back to break her fall. So she woke up in the morning with a broken wrist. I asked her how she came to one of my get-togethers, and I asked her how she got that cast, and she said, "Well, how she broke her wrist." I asked her what happened. She said she broke her wrist. She said, "Well, how did that happen?" She said she didn't know. Well, that's not an answer. That's a correct answer. What do you mean you don't know? Everybody who's ever broken their wrist knows exactly how it happened, unless they were too young, and then their parents know exactly how it happened. It's a trauma running through their minds. So, and the final one is, and now this is good. Now, everything is off the wall, of course, but this one here has a resonance with us in this day and age. They take a woman or take an abductee and they stick her head. I'm using her because the majority of my people are female. They take her into the bathroom, put her in the shower, force her to lift her head up, and then they turn the shower on, and she thinks she's going to drown. And they say, next time you're going to get more, you are going to drown, that sort of stuff. And they do this often, or dunk a woman's head in water, and they do that, and well, that's violence. The way I look at it, that's violence.
How do you get your patients to deal with this? Because, as you said, it's continual. It's ever present and it's continual.
Well, the worst thing is if they're still working with me. As soon as they stop working with me, then everything equals out again. Then they don't have to. There's no violence. There's no nothing. Everything is fine. But they learn that they're too precious to do any real damage to. Nothing is. That's the way I look at it, and that's the way they look at it too. They've been having this done to them since they were kids. Now, no violence or anything like that, but they've been being abducted many times, and therefore there's a lot of energy and thought placed by these aliens into them, and these are prized people, so to speak, who will help these beings integrate into this society. So you can do a lot of things to them, but you can't kill them, so to speak. You can't do it to be just brutal about it. You can't do that. They're precious. Do you think commodities?
But once the hybrids are numerous enough to take over the planet, do you think we're on the extinction list?
I don't know. My abductees have talked about this when they've asked some questions of these beings. And a couple of them have brought up the idea that a small group of humans, they don't know how many, would be kept for breeding processes in case the hybrid program needs more human sperm and eggs or whatever. I don't know. However, I look at the future and I don't like it. I don't look forward to it with what's the next most wonderful, surprising thing that's going to happen. I did years ago when I thought this was the most amazing thing, and this is contact in some way, and these people are just examining us, just like we would do with animals if we found them on another planet and all that sort of stuff. And then the more I got into it, the more I realized what was happening. I began to be fearful of it, and now I really fear the phenomenon. I don't like it at all. I just don't see a happy ending to this. I just don't see it. Even if they keep humans around, we're second-class species. It's once you can control us, that's all you need. You can make us do anything you want, anything. And so I just, for some reason or another, that's a little off-puttish to me.